Okay, the minhag is we learn Basi Legani. Someone's been following Basi Legani, especially the last few years. So we're middle of the called the gedichte prakim, or the complicated prakim, or the hard stuff. So everyone could see that everyone's koching in the maimer, and there's diyukim, and if anyone's on the group, you see there's a ribuy pilpulim and pilpulim on pirtei pratim and how the Rebbe said everything. So it's not only we're going to have the I don't know the time, but also the kavanah over here to get into all the pratim and all the chilukim. Try to speak of the Indian mechlalos, at least lechatchila, what's going on over here and what we're trying to get to, and what's the nikud. They always speak about the nikud of the maimer. What's the nikud of the maimer? What is the Rebbe trying to get to over here? So the emes is that we're deep in the sugya of Oyer and Seif L'mayla and the Ketzim Adadin Tachlis. What sif did it start in? Yeah, Sif Yud Beis, yeah? Where were you? Shemideli, Sheviktana, where were you holding it? 4 years ago, huh? You're already knee deep in the Inyan, the Pashtas. Alright, so the emes is, so it started in Sif Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Dalid, spoke about Lamat Adin Tachlis, then Tezvav L'mayla Adin Ketz, and then comes Sif Tezayin. And it's going to finish this part of the sugya in Sif Yud Zayin. Right, what happens in Basi Legani? Basi Legani is Chachila, when it was said by the Friedrich Rebbe Tafresh Pegimel, was 2 mamarim. 2 mamarim be'etzim of 10 prakim each, and it wasn't divided into prakim, but that's what in the mamar we have today. It would be the first 10 and the second 10. And then Tafshin Yud, the Rebbe divided it into 4. 2 mamarim came out for Yud Gimel Shvat. That was printed. That was given to the Friedrich Rebbe before this Dalkos. But therefore, they have Dibra Maschels, Basi Legani, Teves Beganim, and the second 2 Mamarim don't have Dibra Maschels. They came out after this Dalkos. The first Maimer came out for Purim, and the second Maimer, which this year's Sif is the first Sif of that Maimer, came out for Beis Nissen. And those are the Prakim, Tezayin till Chaf. So, the first half of the Maimer means the first 2 Mamarim speak about the Avodah, right? Basi Legani Achisi Kala, what's the Avodah in this world? Pretty straightforward. But in order to explain that, we have Iskafi, Ishapcha, the Krashim. Yeah, this you remember. So every Yud Shvat we read the Maimer, Chazar the Maimer. So you remember these in Yanim, right? The Ikar is the Avodah, and what is the Avodah itself, and the people doing the Avodah, the Anshe Tzava, and Tzava has a few Perushim, right? How many Perushim in Tzava? 3 Perushim, yeah. And that's who we are. And this Betzim continues into Yud Aleph. And then, in Yud Aleph, it starts speaking about Yud Aleph, Yud Beis. Betzim starts in Yud Aleph. The koiches that we get for the Avodah. So if the first 2 Amarim are about what the Avodah is, what's actually demanded from us, what is the Eibush they're expecting from us, Mo Avodah Kechashoyim Li'imach. So then once you learn what taka we have to do, and it's like, wow, this looks like a very daunting task. Like really? Iskafia, Isapcha, Lasisla, Shtustik Tusha, there's heavy stuff going on there in Basi Legani. How do you do it? Especially that now we're in Golos, and Ishnar in Golos, we're in Ikvisa, and Ikvisa, the Ikvisa, the Mashiach. So how do you do this Avodah? So here, Betzim comes the sugya of the Oitzer. That in order to do our Avodah, in order to be able to be Matzliach, and Taka make the Dir B'Tachtoinim, and win the Lu'um Hazeh, and make from Sheker a Keresh, right? All the different wording that we have in the first few Mamarim. So for this, we get an Oitzer. Okay, so what's this great Oitzer? So first of all, he brings the mashal of the Oitzer. The mashal of the Oitzer is, you know what an Oitzer is? Just like a Melech that has Oitzeris, She'otzer, V'otzru, Avoisa, V'avoisa, Avoisa. This is stuff that are by the Melech. These are the real royal treasures that haven't been touched. Not only they haven't been used, they haven't been touched. They haven't. It's sitting there hidden for generations, and the Melech will never use it. Will never do anything with it. But what happens when there's a matzav of nitzachin, when there's a mulchama going on? You have to win the war. A Melech not only he takes out these oitzres, he's mevazbez oitzres. This is bizbuz oitzres. This nekudah became a primary theme in the Rebbe's Torah, in the Rebbe's Anhaga, in the Rebbe's letters, in the Rebbe's Hadracha, both parts, right? The first 2 Mamarim and the second 2 Mamarim. The first 2 Mamarim, what's our Avodah, Dir B'Tachtoinim, right? The Rebbe won't go by a sikha or a maimer or a letter in one way or another. If it has those words, it doesn't have those words, but an nekuda that every yid is here. Last place where and the whole reason we're here is to be mekayim are the kavana sabriya and our personal kavana. That's the first half, and the second half is the oitzers that we have. Right, so you always need both. On the one hand, you see this by the Rebbe, on a very sticking out of the skull of the and the avodah of the mamar, on a very basic oifen. You see by the Rebbe is always these two emphases. On the one hand, the Rebbe never moves away from, always telling us what our avodah is, what's demanded from us, what's wanted from us, what's expected from us, right? At the same time, it's never just you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. It always comes together with the tremendous koiches that we have within, that were given to us. Right? You always see by there everything, the koiches and the avodah. Fine. So now what are these tremendous oitzres and koiches that are given to us? So Lahavin Inyan says, in Sif Yud Beis, he brings the Maimer Tikkun Zohar, that Oyer in Soif Lamaila Adin Kates, or Lamaila Adin Kates, and Lamata Mata Adin Tachlis. And this goes from Yud Beis till Yud Zayin. And Betzim, what's in the Nekud he's trying to say? Betzim, you could, even though there's a whole arichas and a lot going on over there, what's in the Nekud he's trying to bring out from these 6 sifim? What's he trying to say? So it depends what year you ask. Here. But before we get into the chilukim and the pirtei pratim, how we're trying to bring out the flow of the oitzer, how amazing this oitzer is. Now, what is the oitzer? This is where we have to start learning about Legani, yeah? But with Pashtos, before we get into Pratim, what is the Oitzer? What is the Oitzer is next year, is Sif Yud Zayin. Right, and he brings it here, he's Mitzayin to it in the, let me see if it has the Lashon here. Where's the end of the first Maimer or the second Maimer? Huh? Okay, Sif Ches. Right, look over here. Hanach over here in Mahak, you have here over here Sif Ches. So on page Chaf Vav, so it brings the Lashon. Look on the fourth, right after Messiah this Sif, he comes to me Mavar the Dugma in Eirin Soif. There's different levels in Eirin Soif. And what level are we talking about? The second line, there's a level called Etzem Ha'oyer, line 4. This is the Oitzer. After the whole arichis, this is the oitzer. The kashem sha'oitzer reusasum v'nelam be'in kol roya, keim chinas ha'atzmos usasum v'nelam. Just like the oitzer is completely hidden from everybody, same thing. The atzmos is sasum v'nelam. You hear any change in the middle of the sentence? Etzem ha'oyer, right? A line before, we said it was level of etzem ha'oyer, and that's the oitzer, and then the next line came chinas ha'atzmos usasum v'nelam. So there's two ways of understanding this. One way of understanding this is that when he says B'chinas ha'atzmos, it's a kitzur. B'chinas ha'atzmos, he means the etzem of the oil, which is what we're talking about for the last 7 sifim. He doesn't have to say it over every single sentence. But in some amarim, the Rebbe is medayik that even though the whole arich is speaking about etzem ha'oyer, but in the next line of etzem we say that really sof the oitzer we get only to etzem ha'oyer to atzmos. I'm not giving any hasbar yet, but first of all, Pasha, what it says. That not only etzem ha'oyer, but etzem we have atzmos as well. In the Maamar of the last Sif, Tafshin Lamed, so there the Rebbe sort of makes some sort of pshara, and an interesting var. Here the Rebbe says that the oitzer we get now as koiches and as motivation to win the war, there, what's the highest we get? Etzem ha'oyer. Once we make through that we make the dir b'tachtoinim. Once we make the dir b'tachtoinim, then we sort of get a schar of sorts. Then we don't only get etzem ha'oyer, then we get an oitzer. There's the oitzer post the Mulchama, and then we get Atzmos itself. But I think everyone's okay with Etzem Ha'oyer, but we'll get Atzmos.
It's not the matter of what's the Yanni. Be sure it's a afterwards.
Fine, that's why throughout the whole Maimer, we speak about always Etzem Ha'oyer. The Pashas HaLashon in most places Etzem Ha'oyer. But he finishes off Etzem B'chinas Atzmos because, just to say, he doesn't want to leave you hanging. And also at the end of the Maimer, so you look over here, you see at the end, in this kovetz you have over here the 5 last ifim from the 3 years Legani. So the way he finishes the Maimer is all the way at the end. is goyrim l'mayla gamkein. The last two lines is skabrus hakdusha al klipa v'goyrim amshachas ha'yitzar elyon shu gilui primis v'atzmos ein baruch. In other words, we're already speaking about the you're menatzeach nefesh b'hamis, and we're menatzeach kedusha on klipa. So it's already. So we're talking about the oitzer that comes after the avodah, after Mashiach comes. So that's atzmos. Fine. Now, granted, even in some of the earlier words, I think it was a couple Chavdal, if I'm not mistaken. There he goes and says that there also he says that the oitzer is not only etzem or it's also atzmos. So even in the avodah, there also there was a pull-in. If it was talking about in the avodah or after the avodah, fine. But that's a general mahal. Fine. So this is basically the whole build-up to let us know that you know what kind of crazy oitzers we're getting. Etzem or. Huh? You ever woke up in the morning and felt etzem or? Now you know. Now you know what's giving your chayes to do your avodah. Randall, you feel it constantly, huh? One of our etzem or that's told behelim, so you can't go wrong. Am I allowed in kids? Right. So basically it says like this. So what's the general mahalach? Oirin seif l'may ladin kids lamata adin tachlis. Beis v'gimel yadal he explains lamata adin tachlis. Tesvav l'may ladin kids. Right. The Rebbe a few times asked the question. The lashon hazoyar is l'may ladin kids and then lamata adin tachlis. But in the Ma'amarim, first in Basi Legani, first we bring a few sifim lamata adin tachlis and then l'may ladin kids. What's the hasbara? Because this is what we're trying to bring out, like you said earlier, the flaw. How gevaldik this inyan is. So therefore, what we do is like this. First, we explain to you l'mat adin tachlis over 3 sifim, and mamish. And it's like by the time you're done those 3 sifim and you learn what is it, chav beis, chav gimel, chav dalid. Before we get to the mems, chavs, yeah. It's like wow, this is crazy stuff. And then we come to you in sif tezvav and we say, all that's gevaldik, yeah. L'may ladin ketz. So that's you basically gimel and then tezvav. To tell you the flaw of how great Lamai Ladin Tachlis is. Then comes Sifta Zayin. What happens to Sifta Zayin? So, to understand what goes on in Sifta Zayin, so first of all, you generally soid, and this is a big chiddush in the Rebbe's Ma'amarim on Basi Legani. So, the Rebbe goes through Basi Legani kimat 2 full cycles. Right? Tafshin Yud Aleph to Tafshin Lamed, and Tafshin Lamed Aleph through Tafshin Mem Ches. Memhei was last time the Rebbe said the Maimer was Benigun Maimer. This year is Benigun Memvav. The Rebbe said actually Benigun Sicha. From when this court case started with this Farim, the Rebbe stopped saying Maimer Benigun Maimer from the beginning of Memvav. This went on for the next few years. The first time the Rebbe said a Maimer with the Benigun Maimer was Matzah Zum Mem Tes, 3.5 years later. You can imagine, whereas the Rebbe stopped saying a Maimer with Benigun Maimer. Say on a regular Shabbos, you didn't really realize because most Shabbos on Shabbos the Rebbe only said a Maimer Benigun Sicha. The Rebbe comes to Basi Legani. It says Basi Legani without a nigun of a maimer. It was like, whoa, this is real change. It was like a big shvir also. Like Basi Legani without nigun of a maimer. Basi Legani and Rosh Hashanah are the 2 Ma'amarim of the year that have like their own unique status. Even though Kener Zog and Shmuel Zunah, they don't know, but the Rebbe said because hey Shmuel Zunah, that's coming there. Right? They're both unique Ma'amarim, very deep in Yonim and Askal, and also the Rebbe would, in both of those Ma'amarim, the Rebbe would bring down all Rebbe Seinu Sienu, Rosh Hashanah and Basi Legani. Fine. So the first cycle is pretty much like the Rebbe. It's almost like the Rebbe learning the Maimer Friedrich Rebbe, like Gemara on Mishnah or Rashi on the Gemara, whatever. It's like a pirush. It's a pirush. Now obviously, even when the Rebbe is mefarish, it's chidushim niflaim. It's a pirush. The second cycle, the Rebbe takes an akud of the Maimer and runs with it. Yeah. So now but in this first cycle of the Chavs, one of the big inyanim the Rebbe does in the that you see the Rebbe is medayik in the Maimer Friedrich Rebbe is every year is a new sif. If it's a new sif, it's a new inyan. That is almost like a standalone biyachas to the previous sif and the next sif. Now, okay, say that we're focusing on this sif. No, that's what we're focusing on the sif. Many times, the mamish has major nafkimins. You saw this very clearly in the Mamar of the last few years. You'll open the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer, and don't look at the Rebbe's Maimer yet. Just read through the Maimer. Very often it seems one sif leads to the next sif. It's one hemshech. Why is it in 2 sifim? Basically, because you have to split the Maimer. The original Maimer in Tafarish Pei Gimel is not sifim. It's just paragraphs, right? No, I don't know if they have a split because it's already divided into paragraphs, but it's paragraphs. But it's one Maimer, which is Yosef on the Rebbe, the Shmas Eiden's Mamarim, which is mamish one hemshech, one inyan. And the Rebbe obviously split it and gave it different sifim. But now, because it's different sifim, you see many times the Rebbe is medayik and almost, you could say even ein accent that what's saying in this sif is a different vart. It's not a hamshech to the previous sif. It's a new darga, a new inyan, a new havana, a new hasbar. So let's say in our sif now, the pashtus, you look at the maimer, original maimer, and you go through sif yudal. So like you basically gimel yudalid is mat adin tachlis. Tezvav is the mayla adin ketz. Okay, what's Tezayin doing here? So Tezayin seems to be somewhat of a middle, something in the middle between the previous sifim and the next sif. Because where does he actually say, okay, we already learned what Mat Adin Tachlis is, we learned Mat Adin Ketz is. So which one's the Eitzer? The Mat Adin Ketz. Where does he say that? Sif Yud Zayin. Okay, so what's Tezayin doing here? Tezayin is like something like of a middle child over here. Like what's its gather? What's the gather of Tezayin? So with Pashtus, again, I can't say how they learned it before the Rebbe's Mamarim. I wasn't around then. I'm not sure if it's written anywhere how it was learned. But what you could say is like this. He comes and he says like this. Tezayin, v'hinei beis in yonim elu, the oirin seif l'mayla, mayla adin ketz, l'mat mad adin tachlis, in beis madreges, beirin seif baruch, v'yashefesh gadol b'neim. The masha oirin seif adin ketz, okay, what's he coming to say here? Or what did we think until now? What was until now, and what's the beginning? So l'chayra, what you could say is, you look at the Maimer from Sif Yud Beis, where he speaks about l'mayla and ketz mad adin tachlis. So he never says that it's two madregas. Who mentioned it before? The Maimer speaks about two madregas and two tnuas. Yeah. Until now, what we can zagin, it's just two tnuas. Oirin Seif is pashut. Oirin Seif is a pshitus. Oirin Seif. It's Ein Seif. We'll get to that soon. What's the other Ein Seif? What's this whole sugya, etc. But first of all, what it says. Comes the Maimer here and says, by the way, you should know, these are not just two tnuas. These are not just two sides of one coin. The L'mayla and the Ketz Matin Tachlis, they're two madregas in Oirin Seif. They're actually two different madregas in Oirin Seif. It's two levels. There's like two worlds almost. Yeah? There's two madregas that they're hefesh gadol b'neim. In other words, we're not coming to mechadash a new havana necessarily in l'mayla adin ketz and l'mat adin tachlis. Not necessarily. Or new darga. We're coming to say at das was mat geret. This that we spoke about, l'mayla adin ketz mat adin tachlis. It's not one thing that just like sort of split into. It's not two sides of one coin. It's actually two coins. Right? It's two madregas. And then he breaks down in the Seif how could there be two madregas? Right? Because then obviously you have the question: how could there be different madregas in Oirin Seif? Fine, so it's two madregas. But the Rebbe comes and says, no, we're not speaking about what we spoke about before and just sort of giving it a new title and a new hagdara. There's a new darga here. We're elevating the conversation. And like I said, the Rebbe doesn't just do this in this sif. The Rebbe does this in previous sifim as well. You see from Yud Beis to Yud Gimel. It's another. It's not just a hemshech and then Yud Dalet. Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet, mamash looks like mamash one hemshech. It's like one sif. Lamat adin tachlis. The Rebbe says no. There's another stage here in Lamat adin tachlis. There's another level. There's multiple levels here. There's Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet. And then Zamayla Niketz. And now comes Tezayin and says, everything we spoke about until now, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Dalid, Tesvav, is one layer, is one level of understanding what Mata Ditach is Zamayla Niketz. V'hinei Beis Yonim Elu, what we're coming to say in this sif is that the Zamayla Niketz exists in a different oifen than we explained before. Or it's on a higher, I don't want to say necessarily on a higher level. So the emphasis, so you look in Vayoylech, you look in the second line over here, he says pretty clearly that we're elevating it, that we're talking about a higher darga. Until now was a lower level, and now is a higher level. In Basi Legani itself, Chavav, it doesn't necessarily speak in those terms of lower and higher. What's the Hagdara that he gives in Basi Legani? Again, in this year, I don't want to go necessarily into, for this, everyone goes on the Basi Legani group, you could see Pulpul Magabi Pulpulim. But the Nekudah, what's the Nekudah that he's magdir over here? that until now, he says, until now, what we were saying, what's the Matan Tas Maidlandin Ketz? We're speaking about the way Oyer Ein Soif is Nimshach and Nisala, and Nisala. What's the exact nusach? The Rebbe says it that he says a lashon. Tzitzich und is Oile and Maila bezin Ketz, and it's Nimshach v'Yored and Matan Madadin Tachlis. Tzitzich and is Oile and is Nimshach v'Yored. And what's the chiddush in this sif? That it's two madreges in Oyer Ein Soif Atzmai. Yeah, then the Rebbe says a lashon. Oyer Ein Soif v'er is. V'er is. Okay. So we're not just saying the way Oyer Ein Soif sort of goes out of itself. It goes out, right? It's nimshach lamadadin tachlis, and it's oile sort of, and it goes up lamadadin ketz. You almost say like it goes to its source. So there was when Oyer Ein Soif is sort of this like is this sort of simplicity, right? There's this sort of this simple oyer, pshittas, but then it expresses itself in different ways. It expresses itself lamadadin tachlis, or it's oile lamadadin ketz. The chiddush of this sif is that Oyer Ein Soif v'er is. Talk about Oyer Ein Soif on its own terms, sort of in its own world, in its own terms. Before we speak about what it does and how it expresses itself, or lack of expression, Oyer Ein Soif on its own has l'mayla in the case of madadin tachlis. And then, I'm just going to use the words of the Maimer. And then he comes and says that. So while on the one hand there's two madreges in Oyer Ein Soif v'er is, sort of as it is on its own, yesh hefresh gadol b'neihem. You would come and say, once again, if we're talking about Oyer Ein Soif on its own terms, not the way it expresses. Expression can have all different kinds of expressions. I mean, akatze lakatze. But in Oyer Ein Soif on its own, Oyer Ein Soif is pshittas. Even though it's Oyer Ein Soif on its own, yesh hefresh gadol b'neihem. There's a tremendous hefresh chiluk between these two dargahs. Right, and then the Rebbe comes in the Maimer and says, you all got to this part of the Maimer, right? That the Rebbe says, Oiba zoy l'chayla, maybe let's come and say it's yichoyles. The Rebbe says, no, you can't say it's yichoyles. Yichoyles, what's the problem with yichoyles? L'chayla would solve all our issues. Because you come and say yichoyles, everything's there, but it's all in one simple tenuah, or one simple Indian, but then it wouldn't be yesh hefresh gadol b'neihem. Because in yichoyles there's no hefresh, so you have to say it's oyer. Fine, it's not yichoyles, it's Oyer Ein Soif. And in Oyer Ein Soif, what are these different levels? וכללות, there's what is l'mayla in madadin tachlis, ispashtus ha'oyer and etzem ha'oyer. In ispashtus ha'oyer, there's two levels, right? This you already know from Basi Legani, the Aleph, many other places. Ispashtus ha'oyer la'atzma, and ispashtus ha'oyer la'atzma shaykh l'zulas, which is the shayrish of soivim and the shayrish of mimale. That's ispashtus ha'oyer. That's lamadadin tachlis of the oyer. And then there's lamadadin ketz, which is the etzem ha'oyer. Okay. And we get the oitzer, we get the etzem ha'oyer. Fine. Right, so obviously, all this brings up tremendous amount of questions. And okay, if you want to chazer, what's the vart? What's he saying in the Maimer? That's the sikkim of the Maimer, and he gives him shalom for what etzem ha'oyer is, etc. Okay, so obviously, bechlal, the whole concept. What exactly we look like? Oyer Ein Soif, what's going on? Like, do we need Oyer Ein Soif, and what is, even more than that, what is Oyer Ein Soif, and l'mayladin ketz, and l'madadin tachlis, and two tenuas, or sort of two expressions of it, and then there's Oyer Ein Soif v'er is, and we get the etzem ha'oyer. Let's try to back up a bit. This will be sort of like a. Abbtzan, like I said, Abbtzan the sugya starts in Sif Yud Beis, but it's not just a sugya Basi Legani, it's a sugya bechlal. It comes Yud Shvat, everyone's learning Basi Legani, so it's like nashim etaf, everyone's learning Basi Legani. But these prakim is deep stuff. Yeah, in general, when you learn this sugya in Chassidus, this is the sugya of Mitzayin in the Mamarim here, the sugya of Vayoylech, Hachodesh Vayoylech Samach Vav. One of the Yanim was going on, and then Chavav, it wasn't just the 16th perek of Basi Legani. He's also Mitzayin too, that it was 60 years, right? 60 years to Achodesh Samach Vav. He's going on those weeks. Achodesh is Parshas Boy, Vayoylech, Parshas B'Shalach. Oyer Ein Soif, So bechlal, Chassidus, the sugya of oyer is from the most fundamental sugyas. Why do we speak about oyer so much? Right? Well, Hashem Tov liv gehat licht. Right? He loved light. But what is it about light that fascinates us so much? And why is it so fundamental to Chassidus? And why such a big percentage of Chassidus is in oyer? And I want to read up about oyer, so you have some time and zitzfleish and interest. So Sefer Erchim, so a big percentage of Sefer Erchim is about oyer. There's like 2 krachim about oyer. V'oid yad in the Gans Sefer Erchim. Probably most of Sefer Erchim you could connect to oyer, but like a lot of the Erchim are mamish about oyer. There's a reason.
How many aces it goes to? Gans Sefer Erchim.
Yeah. We're at Aleph Ches, Baruch Hashem. Yeah. So Aleph Vav takes up a lot of space over there. Why the fascination, and why this? Why are we so stuck with oyer? Why are we constantly speaking about oyer? And this also, why at the end of the day, why this biggest oitzer? Why this oitzer that we're getting? Why is it boiled down to oyer? Right? Like why tackle? Why don't we just go to atzmos? Like why that gush on oyer? And then in this maamar specifically, the shlila, it's not yecholos, it's oyer. It's oyer. Right? And in oyer, etzem oyer. So Pashas, where does oyer come in from? Right? Where does oyer enter this whole conversation? So oyer is perhaps one of, or the biggest chiddush, or I don't know if the word is chiddush, but yisoidus of Kabbalah and Chassidus that resolves fundamental issues. Right? Resolves fundamental issues. In other words, later we also, after oyer, another big inyan that came around was obviously there's Kalim, there's Oiris and Kalim, and then the next big deal was Tzimtzum, right? The Arizal brought the Tzimtzum. So that's already. So these are like the big inyanim that made sense out of in the world of Kabbalah. Now, but what is it coming to address? What are the fundamental issues here? So, on a philosophical level, a lot of inyanim and a lot of the hasbaris that Kabbalah and Chassidus speak about are here to resolve fundamental shailas in hashkafa and in achdus Hashem. Now, it's not like there's issues, therefore we invented oyer, right? We came to oyer, we came to this in order through trying to figure out these issues, and we realized that azay is their Indian, right? The Indian is like lamitase. So there are many issues. I'm not going to get into all of them, but the fundamental ones are, or maybe the number one issue is, our relationship with the Eibishter. Right? One of the Yesodis of Yiddishkeit is ani avaya leishanisi. The Eibishter doesn't change. Atu koinish nivra oilam, atu lachash nivra oilam. Now, why can't the Eibishter change? It's not just because Torah says he can't change. So we have to in Kabbalah he can't change. Right? Why can't he change? What's the problem if you say the Eibishter changes? Other than it's going against the pasuk. Why would the Eibishter change? Basically, what you're saying the Eibishter changes is you're saying that there are entities that bring about change, right? Sort of there are people, or there are spheres, or there are other realities that, or let's say the Bria Sa'olam, the creation of the world, the existence of the world brings about a change with him. That's why the pasuk says, that's why the nusach is, because the Chayr Bria Sa'olam brings about change. You're not the same, let's say a person, when you create something, you're not the same person before you create it and after you create it. You're not the same person before you thought of an idea and after you thought of the idea. Until now, I didn't know the idea. Now I know the idea. There's change going on. I invested myself in something, and that investment is time, effort, power. So there's a change going on. The moment you say there's a change, what you're basically doing is you're giving power to something other than God. Right? There's something out there that could create or bring about change in him. There's the Eibishter himself. He's the true reality. And there's something else that brings about change. So let's say I'm speaking to you, and you're speaking, I'm responding. So there's another reality that exists in my world, because thank God I'm not God, right? So I take other existence into reality. So other realities mean something to me. But by the Eibishter, there's no other reality. For there to be change by the Eibishter, there's giving credence to something other than him. And that can't be, because right? There's only one real Metzias. Le'idach, if you say the Eibishter doesn't change, but he created the world. So there was pre-creation and post-creation. Never mind, we go into Chassidus, and the Eibishter is creating the world every moment. We daven. We ask the Eibishter to be Meshana his Ratzon. Yehi Ratzon L'fanecha. The Eibishter wants one thing, and now we're asking to change his Ratzon. So that's change. Every day. One day the weather is, New York weather is constant change, right? The Eibishter is changing every moment. Hot, cold, hot, cold. Where's the weather coming from? From him. So there's a different midah going on, right? There's more chesed, there's more gvura, there's hot, there's cold. There's changes going on. So how do we accept the reality of all these changes and all the things happening in this world, while at the same time, the Eibishter is unchangeable and untouchable, right? The Eibishter sort of is pshittas, tachlis pshittas. Right, there are many other similar questions in this regard, but that's sort of the yisoid of it. The Eibishter, on the one hand, is pashut, is true. On the other hand, there's a world and there's people. So if you want to disconnect the two, the Eibishter and the world is just a Helam Esther or fake or whatever, or Dimyan, fine. Somehow, even the Dimyan, who created the Dimyan? The Eibishter brought the Dimyan. But definitely the world's a Metzias, and the Eibishter is creating the Metzias b'chol rega v'rega. Or we believe in Hashgacha Pradas. The Eibishter is involved in this world at every moment. So he is intimately involved in what's going on. And yet he stays pashut. So many ideas in the world of Kabbalah and Chassidus are betzim addressing this issue in many different formats, in many different forms. What's the fundamental concept of Oyer? So Kabbalah starts speaking about the Nekudah of Oyer, or where do you bring the Nekudah of Oyer? It said like this. Before Kabbalah also, I'm saying Kabbalah didn't invent conversations about the Eibishter, there was the Chokrim, right, the Philosophim. When the philosophers, one of the Jewish philosophers, spoke about the Eibishter's relationship with the world, and the Eibishter gives to the world, right? So what was the general nusach they used for the Eibishter giving to the world? Shefa, right? Not just, there's other Lashonis as well, like it says in the Maamar, there's other Lashonis, but in general the main Lashon was Shefa. Why did they use the Lashon Shefa? So it's interesting. The reason they use the Lashon Shefa is because of the lack of Hagdara that Shefa has. In other words, what we learn in Chassidus, the issue of Shefa, initially that was the Maila of Shefa. Meaning what? Well, I'll get to soon the problem with Shefa that Chassidus has. What is Shefa? Shefa means influence. Giving something. What was he giving? Well, don't be Magdir. We're going to say that he gave this kind of ashpah, that kind. We don't call it seichel. We don't call it. We don't call it light. We don't call it oil. We don't call it water. We don't call it anything. Any kind of hashpah, emotions, we don't call it a certain kind of hashpah. Hashpah, he was mashpia. Leave it pshittistic. Leave it sort of with undefined. Shefa, he's giving us hashpah. But Kabbalah and Chassidus come and say, okay, we hear you. That's why you call it shefa. But on the other hand, there's a problem. We dafka want to use a nusach. We're going to sort of define it and break it down and call it something specific, which is light, which is oyer. Even though I'm being magdir it, because the hagdara of light, what it ends up telling me is something a lot less mugdir than what shefa does. Even though shefa is influence, without telling me which influence, but oyer, that sort of magdir what the hashpah is, fits a lot better with the nekudah we're trying to bring out. Why? He said because shefa, even though you're not saying specifically what it is, but shefa in Torah, and it brings lashon shifas mayim, shefa means that there's actual hashpah being given over from A to B. There was something in point A that's given to point B. So there'd be many forms to this hashpah. A rav giving to a talmid, pouring water from the faucet into a cup, right? There are many different kinds of hashpah. But ultimately, what's the tzad hashav of all these inyanim? Something is over here and is given to here. It sort of leaves point A and goes to point B. Here we introduce the concept of oyer, and oyer is fascinating. And oyer is so fascinating that Chassidus could talk about it non-stop, and every maimer with nocha diuk and nocha oifen and nocha agdara. Why? Because oyer is very, very unique. On the one hand, what happens in shefa? In shefa, something leaves point A and goes to point B. In oyer, nothing leaves point A and goes to point B. Meaning, let's say in oyer, so you have a moyer, you have, let's say, the sun, that's giving off light. Anything went out of the sun, it's like it's giving off light for 12 hours straight. In our world, really, it's giving off light for millions of years, for thousands of years, yeah? and it could go for bli gvul, the shemesh. That affects the sun. Right, it's not like a fluorescent light. Plus, you have a certain amount of electricity to make it work. Right? It's giving out. It's derech hamela. Right? It's derech hamela. It doesn't affect the sun. It doesn't affect the moir in any which way. The light going out, the light goes out, doesn't go out. Let's say also you'll block the sun. You'll put up there's clouds over there, or I'll put my hand on this, or put something here and cover the light. Doesn't make any difference. Right? So a person being mashpia somebody else, if the makabel is not there, you can't be mashpia, or whatever. There's a stop, right? Until you're in true of ashpa, now you're not being mashpia. The light, it doesn't. Nothing's being taken. So one, nothing's being taken out from point A, moving to point B. Number two, the mashpia is not involved, is not misasik in the hashpa. It just happens on its own, right? Like instead the mashpia couldn't care less, give me off light. It's like there's clouds. It's a cloudy day. It's not a cloudy day. The sun couldn't care. Like it doesn't relate because he's not involved in the hashpa. So mitzad echad, that brings out in the nekud of oyer. What does it bring out? It brings out the lack of his askus, right? That how it's removed from the moyer. It's not the moyer. The moyer itself isn't being given over. There's not actual part of the moyer being given over. Le'idach, on the flip side, oyer is more connected and more associated with its source than many other, or maybe even all other ashbas. Even though other ashbas, you're taking part of the source, right? Let's say you're taking some of, and you're bringing it over to a point B. But here, what are you doing? You're taking away something from the mucker, a sliver, a part, and this is going to point B. So the Rav is giving mashpia to the Talmud. The Rav is not giving all of his seichel to the Talmud. He's giving part of the seichel, right? Something that's shaykh to the Talmud. You'll turn on the faucet on full blast and try to get some water in your cup. You can't get anything. You have to be mitzamtzim it, and then some part of it, sort of this a chilik mitzumtzim, can go into the mikabel. Masha'enkin by the moir and oir, the oir is me'ein hamoir, and the oir is davuk in the moir. There's many different kinds of lashons. The kudah is that the oir, look at the oir represents the moir as the moir is. Not a part of the moir, not a sliver, not like the lowest part of the moir. The oir is, it's a representation, it's an expression of the moir itself. Which is why, right? So let's say you look at the light. Let's say in this room, I'm not even looking at the light bulbs. Looking at the light, some of them, you could see what kind of. Right, look over here. I know that it's a white light, right? It's not a yellow light. I would see over here. In the light, you see the more the way it is. Right, you see it more clear. Let's say in the concept of a mirror. So the mirror is like an oir. So I'm bringing a bunch of things into the house, right? What's the famous story of the king that asked for different people to give him some gifts? Everyone created something, and then the one guy came with the mirror, and the mirror sort of showed everything, right? So what's the mirror? The mirror is nothing. What's the mirror? There's a piece of paper, a few dollars in the store. You got a nice mirror. Well, a mirror is garnished. In a mirror, you see everything, right? So when I see it, what do I see everything? You look in a mirror, you see a person. The ganze, his whole mitzvah, every single part of it. The whole tzir is there. Tzacheni, what's the mirror? The mirror is nothing. Destroy the mirror. You didn't destroy anything. Well, nothing was taken away, right? And the person also, when a person walks by a mirror, it's not like I stopped by the mirror and now the mirror sees me. It's derech hamela. The mirror, right? There's no askus to be seen in a mirror. There's a whole avodah for people to see themselves in a mirror, right? But to be seen in the mirror, there's no askus, right? It's derech hamela. On the one hand, derech hamela, so there's like no involvement whatsoever. It's completely removed. Le'idach, right? Le'idach, what happens? Le'idach, it's all here. So it's a complete representation of the mucker. Now, how does this help us in the hashkaf of the inyan? So the nekuda that the Chassidus comes and says is that of course everything comes from the Eibishter, and everything, right, and all the pratim from chol v'chol v'chol. But where is this havos coming from? This havos ha'olam and the hashpa in the olam, and all those things. Where is it all happening? In the oir. This is before we even get into the whole chiddush of the Arizal of Tzimtzum. It's happening in the oir. Okay, one second. So the Eibishter is not involved. So it's not the Eibishter? The Eibishter is not the one creating the world? No, of course he's the one. Why? Because what is oir? Oir is the moir. the whole mitzias of the oir is the moir. In other words, it's a representation of the moir. It's constantly connected to the moir. Unlike hashpa, you take water from point A to point into a new cup. The first cup or the faucet, I can move away. I can go into a different room, and now now the water is sort of a standalone. And then you say, okay, so the water, so this new water is what's creating the world, disconnected from the source. No, oir is constantly double connected to the moir. Right? For a moment, clouds go between the moir, the sun, and the light. There's no light anymore. Right? So it's a constant hashpa. It's a constantly coming from Atzmus, from the Eibishter himself. But where is it all taking place? Where are all these things taking place? In the oir. Right? Oir sort of gives us this maneuvering room. It gives us this space where on the one hand I constantly come and say it's the Eibishter himself, the one doing it, and it's all kayach of the Eibishter. But where is it taking place? All these shinuyim, right? Is the light entering this space or it's entering that space? Is it giving over this kind of oir and that kind of oir, and at what kind of frequency and what kind of and more heat, more cold? All these things are all happening mitzad shinuyim in the oir, which is in him, because the Eibishter is greater than it. The Eibishter is a hecher from there, right? The Eibishter is not mugbal. The moir is not mugbal in the oir. It's greater than the oir. But mitzad sheni, what's the oir? It's him. That's how we get. Okay, so now b'negeya us. So that's the general concept of oir in soif. Now, all these inyanim of l'mayla niketz, l'mata din tachlis, and the different biur, right? If you base gimel yidal tezvav, and then tezayin, right? And then over here we speak about yechoilis, and in oir, and then in one place, and the Ksaved Rebbe writes makim echad, shnei inyanim makim echad. Oir in soif vir is. What's happening over here? What's happening over here is we're speaking about oir. Why is oir so complicated, right? And what's going on here? Nachadar in oir, nachadar in oir, and in oir itself, you're splitting hairs, because that's what oir is at its core, right? Because oir is this sort of mimutza of sorts. Right? You see this Muslim in Chassidus. So much of Chassidus speaks about mimutza. Atzilus is mimutza. Keser is mimutza. And in many words, like, what is the mamutza? What is the ultimate mamutza? What are we talking about mamutza? Mamutza is, it's this tension of, it's all the Eibishter, right? It's all the Eibishter, but it's coming through a certain medium of sorts, which is its own mitzias, but it's not its own mitzias, right? It's its own mitzias, so it's not him. But mitzad sheni, you can't call it its own mitzias, because then it would be like shefa. Because then it's sort of disconnected. It has its own entity. No, it's completely bottled to him. It's completely one with him. It's completely one with him, but yet it's not him. And that's why in oir there's always a sort of this dakostik inyan, and that's also where the lamayla and tachlis. Lamata din tachlis is it's oir, and oir gives off light, which means it's mashpia. It's creating worlds. It's creating oil mesein soif. It's bringing hashpa into this world. That's the lamata din tachlis element of it. And that's what oir is all about. That's why oir was brought here, in order to be a creator, right? In order to bring light, in order to be active. The activities that happen from the Eibishter happen through oir. The Eibishter creates the world, even though the world is created through kayach atzmos, but it happens through oir. But le'idach, it's not only a gilui oir. It's not only an expression. It's not only an active element of creation. Rather, there's also the part of the oir that's completely davuk to the moir and bottled to the moir. The chelik of it that it's bottle and davuk to the moir, that expressed itself klali in the lamayla din ketz. So that's why the oir is never fully comfortable in itself. It's always davuk to the moir. It always goes back. It's trying to get back to its moir. Almost it wants to leave itself. There's a constant discomfort in the oir. On the one hand, it's doing its shlichut. It's doing its avodah. Right, so it's like a shliach. A shliach is going out there, is being meifitz, doing his meifitz. Tzacheni, there's always the siratzoi of going back, because I'm not an entity of my own. Without dvekas to the moir, without dvekas to the makar, I'm a nobody. I'm a nothing. What makes me oir, the whole reason we brought oir into the equation, is that it's totally davuk to the moir. Right, so there's l'mayla dinke. So b'zek gufe, you can always split here as I go more and more and more. In other words, okay, so there's two layers. It has two. No, then even in one darga itself, on every level, wherever you're going to speak about oir, there's always going to be, on every level, there's going to be the split, the l'mayla din ketz and l'mata din tachlis element of it. Bizin era lane. Not only the two ways of expressing himself, he himself is made up of l'mayla din ketz and l'mata din tachlis. Now, what makes this unique? In other words, what is special about this l'mayla din tachlis within itself? Like, how does that look? you tell me Matan Tachlis means that expresses itself outwards. The Ma'ala Diketz sort of goes towards its mucker, where it's nisalim, right? Okay, that I get. What does it mean in itself? And what's the problem with Yecholis? Like Yecholis is also, so Yecholis also in general, Yecholis one sometimes it's like higher than Oyer, sometimes it's in Oyer itself, but a higher level than Oyer inside the Shlemus of Oyer in Seif, who speaks about over here. It's not Yecholis. Yecholis also, you see there's those two parts, but in a different Oifim. Yecholis Atzmos. So it's not Yecholis, it's in Oyer, in the Etzem Oyer itself, and Dafke the Etzem Oyer, and that's what we want to get to, because that's the ultimate, that's that sort of the ultimate space where we have, it's the Eibishter himself, but in a way that we could relate to. That's the whole Vart of Oyer, that we could relate to, and our Shinuyim are able to exist versus Oyer. Versus Atzmos, it's like, okay, everything's Atzmos, and then everything is irrelevant, because it's only the Eibishter himself. To allow the world to have a relevance, and our Shinuyim, and our ups and downs to exist, and yet be completely connected to the Eibishter and get from the Eibishter himself, that comes through the Etzem Oyer. We'll speak on later Shiur, sort of how that breaks something different from how it brings out that Nekuda. But that's sort of what we're trying to get to over here in the Etzem Oyer. Yeah. Whatever, that was a general inyan. Now you'll go into the Maimer. You know sort of what you're looking for. You're looking to find that space. You're looking to find the Etzem Ha'oyer. Even Etzem Ha'oyer, look at the Lashon itself. It's Oyer, but it's Etzem. And why does it say that it's Sasum? What's the Lashon? Stil Akol Stimin. It's totally Sasum. What kind of Oyer is this if it's Sasum? So then what makes it Oyer? Right? So it's even Nachmer. It's Oyer, but it's Sasum. The total Helam and total Gilui at the same time. And this is the Etzem Oyer. This is the essence of light itself. The essence of light is the non-light. Right? These are general ois. We have to understand, like, sort of make sense of it. Like, what does that actually mean? But that's where we're trying to get to.